Hi friends, I'm Gio, and welcome to my channel. Let's go back and visit the frat boys, specifically Dane and Anders. This story is called A Frat Boy Thanksgiving. Had I ever been this nervous before? I drove along the side streets in a part of Vegas I had never been to before. Instead of houses and apartments lining the streets, only the occasional mansion lined the curving road. The houses were the size of my old elementary school and set back from the road. Most had some kind of retaining wall. Welcome to Park Drive, the street of the wealthy rich. I had been driving 10 minutes, checking addresses, once taking a wrong turn, until I came to a gate with the right number posted beside it. "I'm here," I texted my boyfriend Anders. He texted back, "Just got an Uber and leaving the airport, sending the gate code. Have Harrison take you to my room. You can change there. Grandma Suki sends her love." From what Anders had mentioned, Harrison was the butler and downstairs cleaner, and helped organize work schedules for the army of maids, cooks, maintenance people, gardeners, and groundskeepers. He was also a new father. He and his wife had a 3-month-old girl. What did Anders mean change? Was I supposed to bring a swimsuit? An afternoon swim on Thanksgiving would be fun. Maybe Anders had a spare suit I could borrow, because I don't think his parents would like skinny dippers. 30 seconds later, there sounded a click and a hum, and then the gates slid open, revealing the brick drive. It curved and bent around a landscape that had a full tennis court, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a greenhouse, some building I took as an equipment garage, and finally to the main house. Lined up in front were a brand new white BMW Series 5, a brand new blue BMW Grand Coupe, and a brand new black GMC Hummer EV truck. All were polished and spotless and looked like they came off the showroom floor. They probably did. Anders' dad, Paul Young, was founder and owner of the chain dealership Young's Automotive, and he was one of the wealthiest people in Nevada, if not the western states. The 2-story house was a cream stucco with adobe tiled roof, with adobe highlights surrounding every window and door. Out front was a fountain made out of cement blocks. The mansion wasn't big. It was huge, at least twice the size of the frat house. Okay, maybe 3 times the size. The frat house's advantage was it had 3 stories and a monster hot tub out back, and most of our crazy friends lived there. That's around 40 people, plus guests, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, and even the odd pet or 2. The downside, we don't have a swimming pool. Anders doesn't live with his parents, and his older sister and her family lives in San Francisco. All of this house for only Anders' parents? Paul and Subaki Young are insanely rich. I can't believe I'm having Thanksgiving here. I'm also meeting Anders' parents for the first time. I walked up the short stairs, between the columns, and to the front double doors. They were 10 feet tall, if not more. I should have stayed at the frat house. Albrecht was there because Thanksgiving wasn't a holiday in Germany. Harold, our resident boxer, didn't go anywhere. Hutch stayed, because his family lived in Honolulu, and he didn't have the money to travel, and Jason stayed with him. My only close relative in this part of Nevada is my mom, but she went on a cruise with her current boyfriend. I think she likes cruises because she can drink as much as she wants and doesn't have to worry about driving. Yes, I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. Mom doesn't see anything wrong with her drinking, but those around her do. Mom's a mean drunk, and she's ripped my psyche apart so many times. Because of that, I refuse to drink. The frat understands and accepts. My friends understand and accept. My boyfriend Anders understands and loves me. I rang the doorbell. How could anybody hear it in the back of this massive mansion? The door opened. A waft of violin music played in the background and paused. A woman with a Bostonian upper-crust accent commanded, "Play softer. This isn't a concert, but music to set the mood. Yes, ma'am, somebody else said. A 30-ish man stood in the doorway, wearing a crisp, black, very traditional butler uniform. In a crisp voice he said, "May I help you?" "You must be Harrison," I said, presenting the gift of a couple bottles of Martinelli's sparkling white grape juice. "Yes, sir. Have we met?" he said, taking the bottles. Wow, this man was really formal. I swallowed, suddenly a little more nervous. "I'm Dane Richards, Anders' boyfriend and +1. He invited me for Thanksgiving dinner before he left for Japan. He's on his way back from the airport right now and asked me to meet him here." Harrison pulled out an iPhone, checked something on it, and a very slight frown creased his brow. "I see. I'm having trouble finding your name. When did he invite you, exactly?" Harrison said. "About 10 days ago. I can show you the text. He said his mother would send me a formal invitation, but none arrived. I'm to wait in his room until he gets here," I said. I held up the text conversation with Anders and pulled up the text invite Anders had sent me. It had time, it had place, it had a selfie of him, smiling. I hadn't seen him for ages because he had gone to Japan for a job interview and to retrieve Grandma Suki. I couldn't wait to meet her. She was fun to talk to. "Step inside a moment," Harrison said. "I need to check something." Harrison left me alone in the foyer. 2 stories tall with a brass and crystal chandelier. Wow, this wasn't my world. This room was easily the size of the frat house's living room. It had some watercolor paintings on the wall. They were modern, a little abstract, and by artists I'd never heard of. They were glass encased, which probably meant they were originals. A whispered conversation carried through the hall. "Anders' boyfriend, Dane, has arrived," the butler whispered. "Is he on the guest list?" a woman whispered, but it wasn't the same woman I had heard before. The violin music resumed and blocked out their conversation. A second later, Harrison returned. "Allow me to welcome you to the young estate. You are the first to arrive." "Thank you. Can I help with anything?" I asked. "Thank you for the offer, but no. Follow me." The house was bigger on the inside than it seemed on the outside. We passed a formal dining room with 20 place settings and 2 maids placing sparkling white and silver formal dining ware around the table. The crystal goblets were exquisite, and the silver forks and knives and spoons glinted. They placed polished silver wine buckets about the table and filled them with ice. They opened several bottles of what I assumed to be champagne and placed them in the wine buckets. The house smelled of roast ham and garlic and some kind of baked vegetable, a non-traditional Thanksgiving. This was different from the frat house. No 2 plates looked the same, and we had about 80 different mugs and no wine buckets. The guys chilled their beer in the fridge. Anders never said this was a formal dinner, so I dressed in nice slacks and a nice shirt. I didn't even own a suit or a tie. Who dresses up for Thanksgiving anyway? It's all about family, good food, and being comfortable. And Thanksgiving afternoon football games. Maybe the dress code was on the invitation I never got. Anders' room was on the 2nd floor. If I lived here, I'd need a golf cart and a map to get around. God, this place is big. I bet it takes a month to vacuum it. This place had white walls and had modernistic white or light gray Italian furniture everywhere, and spotless mirrors made the place look even bigger, or make me feel smaller. Anders' room? I expected a display of Japanese swords or wall hangings or a replica samurai like on his desk back in our room. I expected a wall rack of samurai DVDs and anime DVDs or even some manga. Cold and sterile, white walls and white furniture, and the bed had a white and gray comforter. Nothing spoke of Anders. Even the light switch was a mirrored plate. "Please don't sit on the bed. Mrs. Young disapproves of wrinkles," Harrison said. "Mrs. Young wouldn't survive at the frat. Every bed has wrinkles, and half are never made," I said. Harrison seemed to frown. "Not Mrs. Young's," he said, and left. I sat on the floor, far from the bed, to avoid messing the snobby showcase of a room up, and called Anders. "I'm in your room." He said, "Be there soon. Grandma says hi. She brought you a present." "Hurry, I miss you," I said. "I miss you more," he whispered. "Love you." I plugged in my wireless earbuds and tucked my phone in my pocket. "Do you have an extra swimsuit?" "Unless Mom had one of the maids throw them out." "Why?" he said. I didn't want to tell Anders, but something made me uncomfortable. A very formal dinner, no invitation. I had a sneaky suspicion I was supposed to dress up. Mr. Paul Young owned several car dealerships, and there were some nice cars out front, but Anders and Grandma Suki had to take an Uber. What was I missing? Soft footsteps in the hall outside. "Just a second," I whispered. Harrison entered the room, a slight suggestion of annoyance about his mouth. "Dane, I've spoken with Mrs. Young, and she indicates that there is no place at the table for you." "What?" Anders quietly said in my ear. "But Anders invited me before he left on his trip. I'm his +1, I said. Harrison remained stoic and said, "Mrs. Young indicated that Anders' +1 has already been selected, and that you are not on the guest list. Evidently, she didn't invite you." "Mom didn't invite you? I told her at the same time I told Dad," Anders said in my ear. I told myself that I wasn't going to get mad, that it wasn't Harrison's fault. It wasn't Anders either. I said to Anders, "Should I leave?" Anders replied, "No, Mother is up to something. Wait for us, and we'll sort it out." I told Harrison what Anders had said. A tiny flicker of a smile crossed his lips, and he said, "Very good, sirs. May I bring you some wine while you wait?" "I'm sorry, I don't drink. Alcoholic Mom cured me of that," I said. The formal facade melted away, and Harrison immediately warmed and said, "That I relate to. 603 days sober. For me it was my father and student loans and my mother-in-law." "I'm sorry," I said. Andrew softly said in my ear, "I didn't know." Harrison gave a wry smile that I suspected hid a lot of pain. "What do they say? One day at a time? I'll bring you a cola while you wait." A tall Japanese woman walked in, her demeanor crisp, no nonsense. She wore a skin-tight black dress that ended above her knees, and black high heels, and dangling gold and diamond earrings, and a simple gold diamond brooch in the shape of a cat. She had her red hair piled high, and her bright green eyes were accented with dark green eyeshadow, and she wore a subtle mauve lipstick. Harrison immediately became stiff and formal. The warmth I had sensed from him a moment ago vanished. "Ma'am," Harrison said. "Harrison, leave us," she ordered in a Bostonian upper-class accent. A quick intake of breath came from my earbud. "Dane, meet Mom." So this was Mrs. Tsubaki Young, Anders' mom. I'd only spoken with her once, and she'd only spoken Japanese. "Very good, Mrs. Young. Dane, I will fetch your cola," Harrison said. Once Harrison was out of earshot, Mrs. Young struck a pose, all her weight on her right foot, her hands on her waist. She gave a short-lived smile that had no warmth and said, "My guests are arriving, so I'll get to the point. I don't like you. Your family is lower middle class, and you could be considered poverty-stricken. Your annual income is barely able to pay your tuition and room and board at that ridiculous frat house." She said frat house like she had eaten a rotten egg and spat it out. "I don't understand, Mrs. Young. I don't have any debt. I own a car, and I pay my own rent and tuition. If you worry I borrow money from Anders, I don't. I don't like debt," I said. Any flicker of a smile she had completely fled her face. "You expect me to believe that? I am aware that you and my son are in love. The truth is, you are after my money. You're a gold digger. You will leave my son immediately. I have made a proper arrangement for his future, an heiress which will cement our families together and bind our fortunes with one another." "I won't leave Anders. I love him," I said. She sighed. "You common people are tedious. What future can you provide? A penniless college student. Your degree, do you honestly think it will make you money? Look at your life. You don't even take care of yourself, let alone take care of my son. Leave Anders today." "What?" Anders said in my ear. "Why would I leave the man I love?" I said. "I want trash like you gone," Mrs. Young said. Now I saw why Anders didn't go home very much. I said, "You ask for me to betray the man I love? Don't you have any honor? Don't you love your son?" My answer is no. She frowned, reminding me of an angry tigress. "Your rudeness is common with the lower classes. Do you know why I did not send you an invitation? I don't want commoners associating with anybody in my family. Your poorness offends me. You are not welcome in my house, and there is no room for you at my table. Leave now, before I have security remove you, and if you don't leave my son, I will personally get you expelled from the university." Grandma Suki quietly said, "Baka." "You can't do that," I said. Mrs. Young gave me a nasty half-smile and said, "I am personal friends with the university president's wife, and she and her husband are my guests for today's feasts. So yes, I can. Go ahead, put me to the test. Defy me. Your low-class idiocy can't stand up to me. My son can do so much better than a piece of filth like you, and I'll make sure of it." A soft squeak came from my earbud. That must be Grandma Suki. "I hate it when Mom plays the snob card," Anders said. I blew a breath out, unsure of what to say, and stared back at Mrs. Young. Inside, I was shaking, but I tried not to show it. Harrison walked in, bringing a can of Coca-Cola on a silver tray. "Excuse me, Dane. Your Coke, sir, and you'll be happy to hear that Anders has passed through the gate. He'll be at the front door in minutes. Come with me, please." "Excuse me," I said. "Walk out that door and keep walking. It's time we took out the garbage." Mrs. Young's glare was like dodging icicles. Her triumphant smirk was like watching a horror movie. Harrison didn't take me along the formal ways, but through the servant back ways. This house is even bigger than I thought. With Harrison leading the way, we arrived at the front doors just in time to watch a maid open them. 2 people waited outside, their suitcases beside them. One was a Japanese woman in her 70s, with shoulder-length silver hair and tired eyes and a warm smile as soon as she saw me. "Dane, you're even more handsome in person." She gave a polite bow, and I remembered to do likewise, even though I wanted to run from this house. She pulled me into a hug, and I hugged her back. "Grandma Suki, konnichiwa," I said. I said the word that Anders had taught me. It meant hello. Forgetting someone, the other man hugged both me and Grandma Suki. He was taller, with long black hair hanging loose, 2 hoops in each ear, and wore a white t-shirt that had a picture of a vintage anime character named Kenshin, a wandering samurai. We'd seen that series a couple of times. It was one of Anders' favorites, and now mine. Anders is obsessed with samurai and Japanese culture. Well, he is half Japanese, through his mom, Tsubaki. "I missed you. I can't believe you got the contract. We have to celebrate," I said, the burn of tears forming in my eyes. "Have I got some stories to tell you?" Anders said. "I'm just glad you're back," I said. Anders held me and whispered, "Me too. Don't worry about Mom." We kissed, and it felt as good as the first time. Harrison cleared his throat. "Suki, Anders, it's a pleasure to see you both again, but please pardon the interruption, but the gate has signaled another guest has arrived. I've taken the liberty of asking May to assist you with your bags." "That's okay, Harrison. I've got mine," Anders said. "It would be an honor to take Grandma Suki's," I said. "Her room is the guest room, just down from Anders," Harrison said. He asked Anders and Suki what they wanted to drink, and said it would be waiting in Anders' room. As we walked in, Mrs. Young glared daggers at me. She mouthed, "Remember," then forced a polite smile and walked outside to meet her guests. I'd never been hated before. I felt cold all over. What was I doing here? We walked to Anders' room, and Anders set his suitcase on the immaculate white and gray bed, while I walked down the hall and placed Grandma Suki's on the bed in the guest room. I took a deep breath and walked back to Anders' room. I entered, staring at all the wrinkles the suitcase left on the bed. Mrs. Young would get upset. I smoothed out the wrinkles and said, "Your mom will get mad." Grandma Suki clucked her tongue, and Anders opened his suitcase and simply replied, "Should I care? I wonder how much of Dad's money Mom spent redecorating this time." Anders pulled a flat package out of his suitcase and handed it to me. I don't think I'd ever seen my lover smile so big. "Open it now. I want to see your face." No matter what, I would be happy for Anders. Even Grandma Suki smiled and watched expectantly. She held 2 small packages. Anders' gift was actually several gifts. First was a full black kimono with dark gray trim. Next, a black with silver trim haori, a large flowing jacket which is worn over the kimono. A silver gray obi was in the next package. An obi is a large fabric belt. Finally, a silvery gray hakama, loose flowing pants worn over the kimono. "What do you think?" Anders said. "I love it," I said, holding the kimono up to me. I smiled, but inside I felt miserable. What right did Anders have to love me? Maybe his mom was right. I was nowhere near his social class. Grandma Suki held out one of her gifts and said, "Welcome to the family, Dane." I took the gift and opened it, a cream-colored teacup with a delicate handle, with a forest green edge and interior, with a matching Japanese symbol. "What's it say?" I asked. Anders took the cup and read the symbol and winked. "Eat it, Joe's." Don't believe my grandson for a second. It says Sagano, and I bought it at the Sagano bamboo forest near Kyoto a year ago. It was my husband, Haru's, favorite place, and we must have gone there 20 or 30 times. Grandma Suki said. A momentary sadness flashed through her eyes. Her husband had died only a few months ago, a few weeks before that crazy night at the frat where I met Anders. "I can't accept this, not when it means so much to you," I whispered. "But it means more that you have it now. I expect you to remember me every time you drink from it," she said, and thrust the other package to me. I opened that one. 6 round pastries. "Hokkaido milk bread donuts with yuzu cream. You'll love them," Anders said. Grandma Suki, her eyes twinkling, took my hand and said, "I have some friends that own a sweet shop. They made these fresh, just for you, so we have to eat them today." I sniffed the donuts, inhaling their aroma, and I wanted to go to Japan right now. I just wanted out of this house. Anders took the box of pastries and set them next to a suitcase on the now very rumpled bed. "Let's have our own little tea party. Right after dinner. Hurry and get changed. Did you put your suit in the closet?" About that," I said. My heart suddenly froze. That was what was meant by change. This Thanksgiving party wasn't a relaxed affair, but a formal dinner party with fine china and perfect upper-crust manners and black tie. Required. I don't even own a black tie, let alone a suit. Somehow, I felt worse. Anders must have intuited my problem because he said, "I understand now. Mother refused to send you an invitation, so you didn't know. I'm sick of this, sick of her pathetic games, sick of her acting the snob. Dane, your mother has her problems, but she lets you live your own life. I'm not allowed. Let's go back to the frat house." "No," I ordered. "They're your family. I'm not going to come between you and them." Anders narrowed his eyes. I held his hand and placed it above my heart, and said, "I love you, but it's better if I leave, keep the peace sort of thing. Mrs. Young didn't even have a place for me, and you hurt her. She doesn't like me. I'm not welcome here." I said, but I couldn't meet Anders' eyes. Anders took a breath and hugged me and said something, but Mom's internalized voice drowned him out. "You're worthless," my mom had said. "You're not worthy of being my son," my mom had said. "You disgust me," my mom had said. "Nobody likes a loser like you," my mom had said. "You're as broke as your father. Do you expect to provide for a family? Oh, that's right, you're gay. No family for you," my mom had shouted. It stung. The loneliness I kept fighting came back. I wasn't worthy of Anders, of the frat, and I'm just pretending that people like me. Mom was right. I thought I had dealt with this years ago, but the pain, the reality, kept coming back. Anders is rich, his family is rich, Face it, I'm poor, beyond poor, after bills and putting aside money for tuition and food. I'm lucky if I have $50 left over at the end of the month. Nobody pays my way. Nobody looks out for me. Anders and I go on long walks for free. We go to the free concerts at the university, like when we went to the Jumping Pyros. If we spend money, we go to discount movies. We play in the frat house's hot tub. We hang out with the guys. If it's free or really cheap, I'll do it. What kind of a life is that for Anders? He's rich. I'm only holding him back. What do we do? Grandma Suki said. Go get changed while I figure something out, Anders said. As soon as Grandma Suki was gone, Anders opened up his huge walk-in closet. Let's see what I have. Maybe you can borrow something. He had more clothes than I had owned my entire life. That was also where he kept his Japanese stuff, like several kimonos and a couple of samurai blades and his DVD collection. He had another samurai figure in a case, dressed in full armor and painted to the finest detail. Mrs. Young never allowed Anders to be himself. He kept his true self hidden. A black suit, white shirt, and a black tie hung in full view. A pair of polished Italian shoes were beneath him, his attire for the party. Anders was taller than me. His clothes would never fit me. Anders pulled his t-shirt off, displaying his incredible full back tattoo of a samurai warrior. He was the most beautiful man I had ever seen. My mom had been right when she said I was lower than the dog crap scraped off of somebody's shoe. Anders' mom was right. I'm too poor. Anders stripped down to his boxer briefs. Back at the frat's get-to-know-your-neighbor party, this man had changed my life. What did I have to offer him? Why did he stay with me? Anders picked up the suit and took the shirt. He shook it out and put it on. He was beautiful. Me, I'm nothing compared to him. I'll just hold you back, escaped my lips in little more than a whisper. I didn't mean to say it out loud. Anders' head whipped up and he stared at me. I didn't belong with these people, with Anders, with the high society crowd. It's all about looks and appearances, while I'm all about surviving one more day. I faked a brave smile and said, just enjoy being with your family. I'll wait for you back at the frat house. Have a good time. Anders took a seat on the bed and pulled me beside him. What's going through that head of yours? I didn't know what to say without sounding pathetic. I tried to keep smiling, but it must have come out wrong. I guess your mom is right. You can do better than me. I'm not good enough for you. Anders caressed my cheek, but his eyes hardened. He whispered, you don't need to say anything, because I heard. You've given me the strength to stand for myself, and for the man I love. You taught me to live within my means. You've taught me that the way I once lived was classist, and I only thought about myself and my problems and my issues. Being with you and with the frat, I have learned that everybody has something they have to deal with. Ben is a cheerleader, but he almost killed someone. He had to overcome alcoholism and pull himself back together. Albrecht is alone in a country far from his home, and it doesn't seem like he wants to go back. Hutch has a heart so big he feels everybody's pain. Niles, the loner who became a cop. Jason, whose family is really screwed up. Should I mention Harold? He doesn't have a family. William looks so normal, but he's an army brat. Why don't you ask him how many schools he's been to? The point is, you've taught me how to care about people, how to live, and I love you for that. Anders held me tight. I held him. We sat that way for a couple of minutes, until Grandma Suki came back wearing a simple sundress and sweater. I have an idea, Anders told me, and Grandma Suki liked his idea. My daughter won't like that. Grandma Suki giggled and went back to her room. 15 minutes later, we were ready. Whatever happens, we stay together, Anders said. I can't believe how nice he looked. He wore one of his kimonos, a black one with white trim, a black haori with a white crane design on the back, a white obi, and a lighter gray hakomo. I wore the black and silver-gray kimono set he'd gotten for me. Grandma Suki wore a kimono in pinks and whites. Anders held my left arm in his right, and Grandma Suki held my right arm, while holding a pink fan with a cherry blossom design. "You two look so handsome," she whispered. "Only because I'm with Dane. Later, would you perform a tea ceremony for us?" Anders said. "It would be my honor," Grandma Suki said. As we went down the stairs, my stomach lurched. I was about to face some of the most important people in Vegas, even the president of the university, and I had no idea what to say. Maybe Anders guessed my thoughts because he let go of my arm and held my hand. Anders leaned in so close that he could nibble on my ear and whispered, "You have the most amazing smile. It lights up the room around you, and the first time you smiled at me, that's when I fell in love. All you have to do is smile, and I am the richest man in the world." I relaxed, and something warm flooded my eyes. Anders ran a finger under my right eye, wiping the wetness. Then he kissed me. The guests congregated in the living room sipping champagne, the men in expensive-looking suits, the women wearing formal wear. All eyed us. We were different. We three were the only ones wearing formal kimonos. Harrison walked around with a plate of hors d'oeuvres along with a couple of maids carrying plates with glasses of champagne. Harrison approached, bearing a single glass. "Don't worry, it's safe." "Thank you," I said, taking the glass. They had chilled it. It contained the Martinelli's white sparkling grape juice, and it was just what I needed. We led Grandma Suki to the foyer to take a seat. Anders told me all about the trip, and Grandma Suki couldn't stop smiling. Anders placed an arm about my shoulders and snuggled me into his. "Would you ever want kids?" "That's kind of sudden. Do you mean adopt?" I asked. "How else? And don't give me no crap about how poor you are. Between your future salary and mine, we could afford it," he said. "Once we both graduate, but I'm not being a stay-at-home dad," I said. Anders took a sip of my drink, kissed me, and chuckled. "Neither one of us do laundry very well, do we? Do you think Harrison could get me a glass of that?" The staccato click of high heels sounded on the marble floor. A voice in a high-class Bostonian accent said, "Anders, Mother, it's good to see you. I need to seat my guests soon, so you'll need to get changed out of your pajamas. This is a black tie affair." Mrs. Tsubaki Young had arrived. "Mother," Anders said, his tone chilled. Mrs. Young drew herself up to her full height, and even though she wasn't as tall as Anders, somehow she looked down on us. "Dane, you are not invited and never will be. Anders, as soon as you change out of that ridiculous costume and into your suit, I will introduce you to a young heiress that will make a suitable match. Her family name is old and honorable, and most importantly, equal to our wealth." Grandma Suki took my hand and pulled herself to her feet. "Where will Dane celebrate Thanksgiving?" "Mother, you're being unreasonable. I invited Dane and told you about it before I left for Tokyo," Anders said. "I did not approve," Mrs. Young said, pulling out her phone and eyeing me. She quickly called. "Security, I have someone I want you to escort off this property. Harrison, go to my son's room and collect Dane's things. He is leaving, never to return." "Yes, ma'am," Harrison said, offering all of us a sad smile as he laughed. "Mother, you can't mean that," Anders said. "This party is for my family and friends, and not for your boyfriend. He looks stupid and low class. Anders, I disapprove of you dating someone so poor, so uncouth. He is only after my money, and I disapprove of you spending any time at that frat house. They are nothing but obnoxious bores, and what money can you expect as a professional translator? And that is not acceptable. I expect you to change to a business major, dump this low life you call a boyfriend, and move back home where I will direct your life. You will marry who I say. You will do as I say. You will live as I say. I will not tolerate defiance. Anders, mother, get change out of those ridiculous rags. Now, Mrs. Young ordered. Mother, no, Anders said. Grandma Suki stood to her full 5'2" height, and she said, You disappoint me, daughter. Has all this money rotted your brain, making you forget how to entertain guests? Mrs. Young took a sip of her champagne and scoffed. Keep your tongue, mother. I won't allow people like Dane into my house. He is not a guest. I nodded and softly said, I'll leave. I don't want to cause problems. You're not the one causing problems, and you're not going anywhere, Anders said. Harrison returned, holding a large paper sack. He handed it to me. I believe these are yours. If there is anything I have forgotten, I will send it to the frat house. Thank you, I said, and checked. The bag contained my clothes, the 2 bottles of Martinelli's, and Grandma Suki's donuts. And my new teacup was on top. I pulled the little cup out and stared at the glossy surface, at the symbol I didn't understand, and tried to ignore the bitter knot forming in my stomach. I had had enough. Mom had done her best raising me, but she had her own issues to deal with, alcoholism being one of them. When she was sober, she had tried to be a mom. I took a deep breath and said, Anders, your rich mother is just like my poor mom, except your mom doesn't have alcohol as an excuse. They're both mean and rude. I'm going back to the frat house. At least they have manners. How dare a poverty-stricken street rat speak to me like that? You're nothing but gutter trash. I will see you kicked out of the university right now, Mrs. Young yelled, stepped toward me, and grabbed the teacup. Get out of my house. She threw the beautiful teacup on the floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces. No, Haru gave me that teacup. Grandma Suki knelt on the floor, grasping for the pieces of the teacup. I knelt and helped her, so did Harrison. Grandma Suki's mouth widened, her eyes narrowed and bubbled with tears. My heart cried for Grandma Suki. She collected teacups, treasured them. She'd given it to me because it reminded her of the good times she and her husband once had. I'm sorry, I said, handing the pieces I had picked up. She tried to smile, but a little tear escaped. Anders took a step back, his brows lowered, his face pale, and he shouted, Mother, you've gone too far. That was a gift from Grandma Suki to Dane, straight from Japan. You have insulted my boyfriend and me and Grandma Suki. Apologize, or I will leave. No. Mrs. Young actually smiled. I've already arranged your life. Your future wife is in the other room. Go ahead, throw a tantrum. But if you leave this house, you'll have access to none of my money. No expense accounts, no trips, no free tuition. No inheritance. Nothing. Go be a homeless bum with a man you love. Let's see how long that love lasts. Mother, when was the last time you even looked at a bank statement? I haven't touched your money for 2 years, and guess what? I'm doing just fine. Andrew pulled out his phone, and I had to look over his shoulder to see what he was doing. He blocked his mother. A disrespectful son does not belong in my family. Apologize for defying me. Beg for my forgiveness, Mrs. Young said. Grandma Suki carefully held the pieces of the teacup and leaned on me so she could stand. Your table will be empty today, daughter. Dane, would you wait a few minutes while I collect my things and then give me a ride to a hotel? I will not stay in a place filled with hate. A man I had never met, but had seen on some car commercials, appeared farther back in the hall, talking to another man. Mr. Paul Young. The man he was talking to? The president of the university and his wife. Mr. Young waved at Harrison, who quickly walked over to him with a couple of glasses of champagne. I froze, my stomach rippling with nausea. This was the worst day of my life. Mrs. Young wasn't kidding. She would get me expelled, all because I had committed the sin of falling in love with her son. The beautiful love I shared with Anders was getting flushed down the toilet. I couldn't stay here any longer. "Let's go up and get your suitcase," I told Grandma Suki. "Gutter trash is not allowed in my house. Get out." Mrs. Young sipped her champagne, a victory smirk etched on her face. I'd just lost the degree I was working for, the man I loved, and I bet Mrs. Young would figure out how to get me fired from my job and thrown out of the frat. Anders quickly kissed me. "I'll pack the last of my things in my car and meet you back at the frat house." Then he whirled on his mother. "You've lost, Mother. I never want to see you again. When Dane and I get married, you're not invited. When we celebrate Christmas, you're not invited. When we buy our first home, you're not invited. And when we adopt, you will never see your grandchildren." Mrs. Young snorted, but her expression didn't change. She didn't believe her own son. I took Anders' hand and said, "But they're your family. Don't cut them out of your life because of me." "Dane, whether we're rich or poor, sick or healthy, for as long as I live, you are my family." Anders held his phone up and took a selfie of the two of us with Grandma Suki in our formal kimonos. God, did Anders look good. Boom. It hit me like somebody had thrown a baseball at my forehead. I couldn't stop smiling. Suddenly, the day turned into the most beautiful, amazing, incredible, happiest day of my life. I stared at Anders, my mouth dropping open. "Did you just propose?" Grandma Suki giggled. Epilogue. I defied Mrs. Young and helped Anders pack his things while waiting for Grandma Suki. We were still in our formal kimonos. Anders and I shared a quick kiss, and supporting Grandma Suki with my left arm and rolling her suitcase behind us, the three of us made our way downstairs. The president of the university and his wife walked up to us, and he said, "You must be Dane Richards. Allow us to be the first to congratulate you on your engagement." "You heard?" I asked. His wife allowed a small smile and said, "In our defense, you weren't exactly quiet." I remained tense and wary and said, "It kind of surprised me when Anders proposed. What can I do for you?" "Mr. Young indicated that you would be joining us at dinner today," the president said. "I'm sorry, but I've been kicked out. At the risk of being rude, why are you talking to me? Mrs. Young said she would have you expel me," I said. "Mother didn't like who I fell in love with," Anders muttered. "Let me put these in the car and I'll be right back." The president swirled the champagne in his glass. "So that's what Tsubaki meant." "Mrs. Young already asked you?" I asked. The president raised an eyebrow and took a sip. "She did. I guess I'll have a talk with Paul about this. We're old friends. We went to the same frat a long, long time ago. Anyway, Paul mentioned a few things about you, and I think the university might have some resources that might help. I'll be back in my office on Tuesday. Come see me about 9? I'll invite someone from financial aid, and let's talk about various programs you could apply to for assistance. But more importantly, my mother was an alcoholic. I know exactly what you're dealing with because I've lived it. Mom's approaching 70 now, but she's been sober for decades. The point is, I've made sure our counseling program specializes with ACA treatment programs. There's a lot of us out there." "ACA?" Grandma Suki asked. "Adult Children of Alcoholics," I said. The president waved at someone. "Paul, come here. I'd like to introduce you to Dane, Anders' fiancé." A man I'd only seen on commercials came over. Mr. Paul Young, Anders' dad. Hanging on his arm was Mrs. Tsubaki Young. My gut twitched. Anders joined me. "I've been looking forward to today so I could meet the man my son fell in love with," Mr. Paul Young said. "According to my son, you are joining us for dinner?" "About that, dear. He's poor," Mrs. Young said. Harrison leaned over and whispered into Mr. Young's ear. "Tsubaki already kicked Dane out, and Anders and Suki are leaving as well." Mr. Young sighed and said, "Tsubaki, don't you remember how poor we were starting out? It was touch and go with my first dealership." We don't want him dating our son. He's dirt poor, and he associates with that frat house. I don't like him," Tsubaki said. Mr. Young's friendly demeanor changed, and he became serious. "I see. Dane, I personally offer my apologies for the rudeness you experienced in my house, and my wife will now apologize for her lack of manners. It will not happen again." "I don't see the need when I only spoke the—" Mrs. Tsubaki Young started to say. Paul cleared his throat, his voice deepening. "You've not only offended our son, but your own mother and our future son-in-law and me. They are fleeing our house because of the things you said. As a hostess, you know that that's not acceptable. As the mother of our son, your actions have been abhorrent. Why will our future son-in-law want to have anything to do with us? Why will our son? You heard Anders. They are denying us the chance to know our grandchildren because of how you treated our son and his fiancée. You have embarrassed me, and your actions bring shame." "Dane is a gold digger, only after our money," Mrs. Young said. "I see. Anders, how much of my money have you given Dane?" Mr. Young asked. "He let me buy him a hamburger and fries once, but I didn't use your money. I paid for it myself," Anders said. Mr. Young's eyes narrowed. "You're still always needing to prove your independence. I think we can afford a hamburger and fries. Tsubaki, we can't afford the dishonor you bring on our house. Apologize." Tsubaki gave a fake smile and said, "I don't see the need. Dane is an unsuitable match." "Mother, you don't have a say in anything. I'm 24. Mind your own business. Better yet, Dane, let's get out of here," Anders said. With a voice that would chill ice, Mr. Young said, "Tsubaki, your rudeness is costing me my son. I will not forgive nor forget." Tsubaki paled, slightly bowed, and said, "Dane, Anders, Mother, and Paul, I beg your forgiveness for the things I said and the way I acted. I also wish to congratulate my son and his fiancée on their engagement." "Good," Mr. Young said. "Harrison, please make sure there are enough place settings for all of us, and place Anders and Dane near me, because I'd like to get to know my soon-to-be son-in-law. Before we start, I'm going to change into my kimono." The end. Thank you guys for joining me for the latest Frat Boys adventure, and I appreciate it. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace.